Hello everyone. For today's Scrappy project, we're going to be making a little pillow cover. It's the envelope style, so if you flip it over, you can see that it has a nice little opening there, so you can take it off and wash it. And then I also made this insert, which I will show you how I did first. And I'm using all recycled projects, stuff that I already have at home. I had this wadding that I pulled out of a stuffed animal that my kids kept ripping open, and I was tired of finding this all over the house. So I just put it in a bag, found an old pillowcase that no one ever uses because apparently nobody likes this one. So we're just going to cut this up and make a little pillow form. And the beauty of making your own pillow inserts is you can make it any size you want. I'm just going to be making a 16 by 16 because I'm not sure how much of that batting or wadding I have. So I just want to make sure that I have enough. And I figured this is a great little practice one because, well, I've never made an insert myself before, but it can't be too hard. So I'm cutting this at 17 by 17-inch square. That way, when I sew it together with a half-inch seam allowance, I will end up with a 16 by 16 pillow. So it's really easy to figure out what size you need to cut your pieces at. Just add an inch to whatever measurement you want your finished size to be. So once I have my pieces cut, I'm just going to lay them right sides together. And I am going to mark a spot to remember so that I don't sew there. I need to leave an opening so that we can turn it right sides out and for stuffing later. And then we're just going to sew with a half-inch seam allowance all the way around. You can pin or clip it. I prefer clips and I use clips wherever I can. I don't pin unless I absolutely have to. So then just take it over to the sewing machine and sew at a half an inch seam allowance all the way around, making sure that you backstitch when you start and when you stop because, well, it's going to get a little bit pressure when you turn it right sides out and stuff it, and you don't want those seams to pop open. And then once you're done sewing it, you just want to cut your corners just so that you can get a nicer point there. And make sure you don't cut your seam. Just cut as close to the seam as you can without actually cutting into the seam. Do that on all four corners, and then we are going to be ready to turn that right sides out and start stuffing it. This is actually an easy project, and some of you might not be interested in making your own, and that's fine. You can buy them cheap enough at Walmart, I think. But like I said, I'm trying to use up all my stuff that I have at home, and I have so much in my sewing room. And I figured instead of just throwing it all out or giving it all away, I would make whatever I could out of it. Once I had that done, then I just gave it a little bit of a press. You don't really have to do it. And for this wadding, because it is pretty matted because it's old, well, it's been a stuffed animal, I am kind of fluffing it up a bit. Probably new would be better, but like I said, this is just a practice run for me and something that my kids are probably going to demolish anyway. And then another bonus to making it yourself is you can make it as full or as light as you want it because some people prefer a firmer pillow and some people prefer a softer one. I don't like them too terribly full, but I do like them stuffed to a decent point. So I'm just going to keep doing this until I get it as full as I want it. And then once you have it to the level that you want, you just want to close up that opening there. You could slip stitch that or take it to the sewing machine. I don't want to hand sew, so I'm going to be taking this to the sewing machine and then just sewing about 1/8 of an inch over the edge just to make sure that that opening is nice and closed. But before I do take it over to the sewing machine, I am just going to double check to make sure that it is as full as I want it. And if I want to add more, I can do this now without having to unpick it. And I'm happy with it. All right, it is all sewed up and I'm just going to fluff it up a bit. It's looking a little lumpy, so I'm going to try to make it look a little bit smoother. I maybe should have used a contrasting thread because you can't really even see it there, but I just sewed about 1/8 of an inch. So if you don't know what size your pillow is when you want to make your own cover, it's very easy to figure it out. All you need to do is take the tape measure and measure from one seam to the other seam, and whatever that is the size that you want to cut your pieces at to make your envelope style cover. And all right, you could just use solid fabric or whatever you wanted, but I want to use up my scraps, so I'm going to be using those scraps to make a cover for mine. And I'm going to be using a thin muslin that I have in my stash as my base for my crumb quilting or crazy quilting. You could use batting if you wanted to, but I figured I wanted to use this up because what else am I going to use this for? So I cut it a bit bigger than what I needed it, 17 inches. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of fabric that I like and lay it down right sides up. And then I'm just going to find another piece that I want to go with it that's kind of the same size. And I'm just going to lay that one right sides together with the other one. And we're going to sew it at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. It doesn't have to be exactly a 1/4 inch, just somewhat. And then just try to keep your lines straight. And that's all that really matters here. And then you're just going to cut your threads. And at this point, you can either decide if you want to just sew and flip and just keep going and adding to it, but I want to add some decorative stitches to mine. But if you weren't planning on doing that, it's actually very easy to just take another piece of fabric, figure out which one you want. And like I have my scraps here and I'm just cutting them as I go. I have no plan here. It's just going to kind of come together or it's not. We'll see what happens. But yeah, then you could just take that piece and sew it on there. But like I said, I want to do a decorative stitch. So I'm going to be doing number 19 on mine. I like that one. So I need to just switch my machine to the specialty stitches and then switch it over. People have fancier machines, but for me, this was a little bit tedious changing it back and forth the whole time. But I did like the way it looked, so I just kept going with it. But I don't know if I would do that very often because it is a lot. And then constantly remembering to change your stitch back to either straight stitch or specialty stitch. And you could even use this method to make like different blocks and then make a whole quilt like this. I think it would take a little while, but it would look really nice in the end. So there you can just kind of see what it looks like. I'm using a black thread because I want it to stand up. And I did get some new thread from Connecting Threads. I really like it. I'm going to try to link that down below. And here you can see I've done a few more pieces and you can kind of see this decorative stitches on there. And I'm really liking the way it looks. And like I started with smaller pieces and then got bigger and bigger. And then sometimes when I didn't like the way it looked, I just cut it off a little bit because that's the beauty of this. Just do whatever you want. It's supposed to look all crazy and wonky, so just keep doing it. And all you need to do is just keep building on and adding fabrics wherever you want. I'm just kind of trying to keep lights and darks a little bit separated so it has a little bit more contrast. But really, I didn't have a plan. I'm just kind of winging it. But sometimes those projects end up being the nicest, right? The ones where you have no plan. If you've ever made this style of quilt blocks or any other quilty projects, I would love to see them. Feel free to join my Facebook group. The link is in the description box below, and then share your pictures there. All right, I have finished filling that block and now I'm ready to start cutting my pieces to make my pillow form. This is the fabric that I chose for my background. And for the back, we're going to need two pieces. So I did 16 divided by 2, which is 8, and then I added 3. So I cut two pieces at 16 by 11. And then the front piece, I'm cutting at 16 by 16. And you're probably wondering, why am I cutting it at 16 inches since the pillow is 16 inches, but you want it to fit nice and snug. So that's why I'm cutting them at 16 by 16, and I will still be using a 1/2 inch seam allowance here. So I'm just trimming this one up to 16 by 16, and then I'm going to take those back pieces to the ironing board because we want to get rid of those raw edges. So I'm just going to fold it over in half and then in half again and give it a good press. Here you can see what that looks like. And then I'm going to take it over to the sewing machine and I'm just going to top stitch along that edge there just to secure it. And I'm sewing it at about 1/8 of an inch from the edge there, but it doesn't really matter. You just need to make sure that that's secured and it's not going to flip up and no raw edges are going to be out. So once we're ready to assemble, then we just lay our front piece 3 sides up, and then our back pieces, like we want the right sides touching here. So you just want to line that up to the outer edges, and then we're going to take the bottom piece and do the same thing. And yes, those back pieces are going to be overlapping, but that is what we need to get the envelope style. I like making them like this because then I can take the covers off and wash them. And when you have kids, you want stuff that's washable. So again, I'm just going to be putting some clips in here just to hold everything in place so it doesn't shift when I'm sewing it. You can use pins if you want to, or you can just try winging it. That's entirely up to you. I'm just going to take it over to the sewing machine. And again, I'm going to be using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, making sure that I am back stitching at the beginning and at the end. And when I get to those places where my fabrics are overlapped for the opening there, I am going to back stitch more than once. I really want that to be nice and secure because when you're constantly taking this off of the pillow form, it is going to get a lot of stress. So you want to make sure that it's nice and tight. So yeah, just sew all the way around, and you could finish off those raw edges by doing a tight zigzag stitch or running it through a serger if you have one. I'm not going to be doing either one of those. I'm just going to be using my pinking shears and cutting all the way around there. That's just another way to keep the edges from fraying, and I don't like fraying edges because this is going to be going in the wash a lot, and if I do need to, I will serge it later on. So I just got these pinking shears off of Amazon. They weren't very expensive, and they cut like they're not very expensive. So I will definitely be investing in some new ones. That way when I'm cutting through thicker layers, it's a lot easier on the hand. So once it's done, then we're just going to turn it right sides out, making sure that we can get those corners to look as good as possible. And if you need to, use a tool. And then I'm going to take it over to the iron and just give it a little bit of press, making sure that I have all my edges rolled in nicely so it looks nice. All right, it is all done. I am ready to put my pillow in there. And before I forget, I did hit 1,000 subscribers, and I thank you guys so much for that. And to do a little bit of a celebration, I will be doing a giveaway later on this month. So make sure that you stay tuned for that. And if you're not already subscribed, make sure that you subscribe so you can enter that giveaway when I do that. When you put this pillow in here, you just gotta finagle it in there and just kind of wiggle it around and shove it till you get it in there. I really like the way this pillow turned out. My son was very excited when he saw it and he immediately asked if it was his, and I was just like, no, but maybe I'll let him have it. But there it is. It's all done. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I thank you so much for stopping in and watching, and I hope you try to make one yourself and share it on my Facebook group. I would love to see it. Until next time.